type of issues. Another identified liability. What happens if there is a violation of copyright? How is that going to be addressed? And if the data is moved from one location, it's created and stored in another. Is there an opportunity to have a uniform mutual recognition IPR system? You know, these are the type of issues that we've seen addressed through bilateral and multilateral organizations. And I guess with the G20 here in town, is this an opportunity for the G20 to have a statement and maybe go from the statement to actual action? Some of the other issues that we are seeing, spectrum policies. This is key to the infrastructure investment and innovation. You know, it seems more and more we need spectrum. It's one of those wonderful success stories where at AT&T we've been so successful in the mobile market that we now need more spectrum to continue the success. And I think every country is going to face that. So how should that spectrum be allocated? You know, should it be market-based as we would propose? Or I think as the FCC, my former employer, did many, many years ago, what was called a beauty contest. You know, how do you allocate the spectrum? Will drive directly on mobile broadband. And as a side note, when we think of broadband, you know, traditionally broadband was divided into two categories: fixed line and mobile. And the OECD has done a number of wonderful reports on the statistics of deployment. But what we're seeing is consumers, businesses, you know, it reminds me of the old commercials. They just want their broadband. Anytime, any place that they choose. So that needs to have the ability to go from your fixed line laptop plugged into the Ethernet to your handheld device and transferring the data back and forth. In order for that mobility to occur, you know, there needs to be integration both with the devices and the data centers in the cloud where you're accessing your data. So spectrum policies are key. Technology neutrality. You know, maybe I'm going on a limb, but you know, it's one of those cases where, you know, give private sector a chance to succeed or fail. You know, whether it is LTE for fourth generation networks or WiMAX. These are competing technologies with similar characteristics, but yet different characteristics. You know, one of the things we're seeing is at AT&T, when we purchased, I think we spent $12 billion in the U.S. for the 700 megahertz spectrum. You know, we went through the process of which technology were we going to choose. You know, the opportunity was we've got to make the choice. And after much testing and research, and a lot of research and testing, the company chose to go with LTE. So that was the technology neutrality opportunity that we had. And the next phase is that ties directly into ITR or ITU standards. So if you have standards that are industry-based, that have been thoroughly vetted, there's an opportunity for interoperability so that data can go from one provider to another provider. A couple of other just brief issues that we're seeing is, believe it or not, private sector investment barriers. There is still quite a bit of protectionism in the marketplace. It is very subtle protectionism, and I would categorize it in three general areas. One is licensing. You know, is a foreign entity permitted to get a license in a country? If so, next issue is, do we have to take on a joint venture, a local partner? At what percentage is that local partner? Third, we are seeing some government procurement policies, again, subtle, where there is preferences given to the domestic producer as opposed to the most qualified bidder. And then another issue that's part of that is local content requirements. One country in particular requires that 35% of your capital expenditure has to be on domestic produced goods. And the question that we have is, would you rather have that type of policy or a policy that encourages companies to deploy the most efficient, highest quality of service equipment in order to meet the customer's needs? So it would be nice to see the G20 come out with not just statements, but actual actions in order to implement this type of cross-border data transfer and investment. Finally, I'd like to at least highlight one issue that is just coming up reoccurring, and that's transparency, both in terms of licensing, government institutions, education. Unfortunately, these issues continue on. And I think it would be important for the G20 to highlight and maintain why is it important for governments to be transparent on their decisions. Well, for one is in order to make certainty for private sectors that when we make an investment, we're aware of the risk and we're willing to take those risks. But if those type of government requirements are changing without a due process, without a transparent process, it significantly increases the risk of doing business in that country and thus directly affects investment. I'd like to leave you with one quote from John Quincy Adams, an American statesman. A leader leads by example, whether he, she intends to or not. Thank you.